It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sapp, and we're so excited to be back for Season 6 and continue bringing you outstanding ideas and thought leaders and different ways of thinking. So don't forget to subscribe because you're not going to want to miss any of it. He's back. Technology expert Brian Scott's here to share some insights on automation for associations and how you can improve your internal operations. It's November 4th, 2024. Welcome to episode 261. Hey everybody, it's Monday, November 4th. Can you believe it's already November? Well, it is, so take my word for it. I'm Cecilia Sapp. I'm your host here at Radio Free 501c. Glad you could join us this week. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting, and I'm a CAE and an ACNP. And thank you so much for joining us this week for another conversation with Brian Scott on technology issues. But before we dive into our topic, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. And a quick reminder, if you haven't followed or subscribed yet on your favorite podcast service, please take a moment and do that so you don't miss any of our future episodes. So, Brian, you're back. We had such a great conversation last time you were here. This time, we're talking about association automation and how associations can work smarter. But before we start in on that, could you please say hello to our audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cecilia. So hello, everyone. Great to be back. I really enjoyed our first conversation. I am a through and through career technologist. I call it the OG, like the original geek. That would be me. Started as a geek in high school, and I pretty much kept that all the way through my life. I just get really jazzed up about technology. And since I founded my consulting firm, Cleartone Consulting, I've been really jazzed up about two areas principally. First was our first discussion around cybersecurity. It's a fascinating world of global, bad guys and good guys. And the second is automation. I just, throughout my career, I get really excited about building technology in a way that helps people do things better and faster. And that's never gone away. It's just a passion of mine. And so today we're going to talk about the automation world, and specifically something that's referred to in a lot of writings today, no-code, low-code platforms. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of them out there, but it's really, what does that mean, and how does that help organizations do things better?
Well, and I think that's a great place to start, because I think we all have a basic understanding of what a platform is. So that's where our service is and how we can use it. And I know there's a lot of automations built into things now, especially with artificial intelligence coming in everywhere. Even my calorie counting app, it's like, gee, I just want to enter my lunch, but it's trying to help. Get out of the way. But sometimes automation can get in the way. And I'm a person who has kind of a silly sense of humor. A lot of times when I think of automation, I think of one of those old Warner Brother cartoons with the assembly line, and somebody usually ends up in a box. Yes, exactly. Brian's moving his arms up and down if you're listening. And that great music they have, like dun dun da 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 dun 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 dun. So that's kind of something like automation. But, at the digital age with all this technology, there's like so many layers of automation. So can you walk us through what a no-code, low-code platform is? I think that's a great place.
Sure. It is. And so when people talk about platforms today, most of the time they're really referring to SaaS as another acronym you hear a lot, software as a service. Oh. And Salesforce is one of the most known software as a service. You don't have to build anything. You subscribe, and then you've got this great tool, and that's a SaaS tool, and that's a SaaS platform. And there's a lot of them out there, and they've really transformed our world in that way. Many of these platforms, like Salesforce, and then some independent platforms, have gone further, and they say, well, we allow you to configure some things in Salesforce, but what if you actually want to build some things here, like build some screens yourself that have the fields you want on these screens and use those screens? Well, now it's really it's moved from just what the platform gives me to I want to create something to interact with data myself in it. That's really what no-code, low-code is. It didn't require you to have years of coding experience. You weren't getting out and writing code from the beginning and deploying to servers and stuff. You're using a web-based platform, but it allows you to build things that you interact with, screens, interactions, functions, right? And so a lot of these big platforms like Salesforce offer that as a part of their offering. There are standalone offerings out there like Airtable. Some people may have heard of Airtable, and Make.com or Zapier or integration platforms. You don't have to be a developer to use them. They are technical still. You really have to have an understanding of data and the things that you're trying to do. So I wouldn't say it's quite to the point where anybody can do anything yet. But it's so much easier, and it is a less skilled person, right? That's not a full-on developer that can build some really helpful applications around data.
And that's a good point about integrations, because it used to be, at least from my perspective, it used to be you had to have a professional IT person to work with integrations, because you had to make sure that it worked and whatever it was you had to do on the back end to get it up and running. But you're right, like things like Zapier are amazing because you can just go out, find that integration. Like, for example, at Rogue Tulips, we use Squarespace for our website, and there's a lot of Zapier integrations that will work with that. We use a Zapier integration for our CAE practice exam so that it will integrate with Google quiz form. So it really is, you're right. I mean, you can shop around and find those things, but is that a good idea
Yeah.
for somebody like me to do that?
Well, it is a great idea because you can get a lot done. I mean, I don't use Zapier. I use Make.com, but it's like the same thing as Zapier, right? To do a lot of automations, and it's so helpful to not have to go do all of these manual little steps, right, all the time. It can really bog you down, and that's the old way of working, right? You really want to leverage technology to do more for you, right? And a lot of these platforms are integrating AI in them, so it's even easier. Some of them you can type in a prompt of what you're trying to do, and it'll start to say, oh, then this is what you need to do, and it'll kind of show you or set it up for you. Airtable's really big into AI. If we get into that subject, I'll talk more about it. So it's a great application of AI to help people get done what they're trying to get done. But there is a balance, because in an organization, let's take an association, it's great if everyone can do things themselves if they have an idea. But what happens if that happens? Well, before you know it, you get a little bit of a runaway of what's called shadow IT. And that is where people in this department started using Zapier for something, and people in this department started using another tool and Make, and then they decided to start using some other platforms over here. And before you know it, then they start talking to each other, and they're like, well, why don't you come use Jira? We use Jira. No, we're on Monday. And you have this proliferation of these easier tools. That in itself becomes an issue, right? So to answer your question, it is great that it's being democratized. Technology is being democratized and coming down to the masses, but it needs governance, guidance, and vision still on top of it to make it effective.
And I that's a really good point, because as you and I were preparing for this episode, I mentioned to you an organization where I worked, and I walked in and found a patchwork quilt of technology. And there's nothing wrong with adding tools. Like, I know a lot of people love Asana for task management, for example. Another one I've heard people using more is Monday.com. But if you're using Asana and I'm using Monday.com and the accounting department's using something else, this starts to become a problem, because you end up not saving time using a software service because you're trying to figure out which one I'm supposed to be looking at for whatever this project is. And I love that term shadow IT, because I think that is a great way to describe it, because it's all those things that people are doing that you may not be aware of. So for a solopreneur like myself to go out and find an integration and just say, I'm going to use this integration, that's one thing. But if you're in an organization with a lot of people in different departments and things, what are some good tips for making sure your automation doesn't all happen in the shadows?
Yeah, someone really needs to be assigned the task of understanding and mapping the landscape, right? And so that's where it starts, is just knowing what's there, right? And so and that's a cultural thing that that has to come from the top. They got to say, look, we're gonna understand what we're using, and let's pretend we just had a big whiteboard, in the old days when we were all in an office, right? And if you're going to use something new, I want you to come in on this whiteboard and put it up on the whiteboard so we're all aware that it's there. And before you go off and sign the license for it, let's stop a minute and look at the rest of the whiteboard and go, well, wait a minute. That's exactly what this tool does, and we're already using that. So is there a difference between these? Should we really look at just using the one instead and just have an intelligent discussion about it at first? But to do that, it takes someone saying, we're going to have an inventory, and you can't, subscribe to something and start using it until we've looked at our inventory. And that could be a 5-minute discussion or a 10-minute discussion, but made an intelligent collective decision on it. It's just the lack of having that whiteboard space, if you will, to collect things that things start to lurk off into the corners and you don't know about them.
See, and that's a really good point because, technology of any kind, whether you're automating or you're doing bookkeeping, it has to be managed and everybody has to be able to access it who needs to. One of the things that we do at Rogue Tulips, even though I'm a solopreneur, I do work with a couple of contractors who help me out. And so Fern Carbonell is our client services manager. So she helps me a lot with operations and administration and marketing. She pretty much helps me with everything that makes the company work. So once a year, we do a technology audit and we look at what are we using? How are we using it? Do we still need to keep using this? And because we do that every year, we have really been able to streamline how we do things. And we've shifted a lot to Google Workspace for pretty much everything now, as far as like our interactions. And that makes it so much easier because we're both using the same thing. I'm not like doing tasks on my Google Calendar and sending her emails. She's not using the system she likes to use for her own task management for her company. So we're all in one place and we do evolve, like we will shift from one thing to the other. I think that's a really important thing because automation doesn't just make things faster. It should streamline things as well and make it easier for the team to work together. At least that's my opinion.
Oh, I agree with that. And it's really critical. Unfortunately, for too many organizations don't have that centralized view of things. And maybe they're small enough, a lot of associations that way, that maybe they don't have an IT person, and that's okay. You don't have to have a single person that makes the decision, but maybe at least from the top as an executive management team, we're going to say, we're going to know what's going on and we're going to collaborate and we're going to have a document at least that documents it. And so that we're together. Technology, is kind of like, let's think about it as ingredients for cooking. An ingredient by itself has all this potential and, this spice is great. And this is, you can do all kinds of things with this. It's just going to make it great. Right. And you can get really excited about that over here. But, if you're just grabbing ingredients willy nilly and you're kind of throwing them in, it's going to be kind of a funky tasting, dish, right? It's going to get kind of weird. And technology can do that. It can start to trip you up and become difficult because of everything that's added into it. So, you just have to have some coordination and it just start at the top. Another aspect about, though, our work world today is the pace at which tools are being created, evolving, changing is continually increasing, right? And so it's not enough as a knowledge worker today to just know the business that you're trying to do and know one tool set, right? That the key is not to be knowledgeable in one tool set. The key is to know how to learn new tool sets, because there's so many coming in. The more you do that, the quicker you get at it. And if you're someone that can learn a new tool set really fast, you will flourish, right? And going forward, because there will be ever more, especially with AI entering, there's just that many more tool sets and new things. So the change of tool sets will be a constant in our environment. That's a kind of a forewarning for those who don't like to change their tool sets, right? It's just the world we live in today.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and that's such a good point because I've been starting to think about what is the post Office 365 world going to look like? Or or maybe they call it Microsoft 365 now. I've been using
Mhm.
it so long, I still call it Office. But
Right.
it was a great system because it was integrated. I think their database was not good access. Like I never liked that, but so I
Mhm.
never used it. But
Mhm.
it was integrated, and you could apply it. But now you have like all of the tools from Google that you can use, and those seem to get better every year. They seem to be, consistently upgrading those. And I think the real thing is going to continue to be mindset shifting, not just shifting to a new tool. It's getting people to let go of the old tool and move to the new tool, like just trying to
Mhm.
get them to use things like Google Group, if that's what you're using, or whatever online community you're using. There's some of that, but I think with the, I was just laughing about your recipe though, because how many times has technology left a bad taste in your mouth?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Right.
like how many times have you tried migrating to a new AMS and then it just doesn't work, or it doesn't
Mhm.
talk to something you need, like it doesn't talk to your accounting software. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people use QuickBooks. It won't talk to QuickBooks or whatever,
Right.
or it's the desktop version of QuickBooks, not the online version. Oh my God, and like all these
Mhm.
things can go wrong. But as you were saying earlier, though, if you have that top-down view of let's make sure we're all integrating things in a way that makes sense, because
Mhm.
like you made that really good point. Sometimes you already have a system that's doing what somebody is trying to add on because they like it. And I think that's really similar to the issue of people saving everything on their hard drive. And so saving
Mhm.
it in the shared folder, wherever that may be, SharePoint or whatever you're using
Mhm.
to do these things. But I'm seeing these systems are becoming increasingly sophisticated and easier to use, like within a bubble almost. Like the Microsoft suite with Teams, like I consider Teams like a whole separate suite
Mhm.
outside of the Office tools because it
Mhm.
it does so many different things: file management, OneNote,
Mhm.
the chat, the task manager. I mean, you can just pretty much do everything in that one little space, and it's actually really effective and efficient.
Mhm.
And a lot of that has to do with artificial intelligence. So, do you think artificial intelligence is going to drive us in the wrong way of automation? Because it just does stuff sometimes without you wanting it to. Like if you've ever been trying to dictate a text and it keeps changing the word. Like I was
Yeah.
sending a text to somebody and I was trying to say Bitly, like the URL shortener, and it kept
Right.
Bentley, like the car. I had to correct it like 5 times, right? So it
Right.
was
Right.
like, so, AI can help us a lot with automation, but do you think it's going to be an issue, at least for the next, like, I'll say 3 years, because it's still,
Well, I think I'll say this, it's a wave that we can't stop for one thing, right? And it's so early in its application. I mean, it is still really early. So you're going to get a lot of quirky things along the way that we're seeing, right? But it will always continue to get better and better. And it real though, I think what that to me highlights is that to date, we've had a way that we interact with technology, computers, and it's been through the keyboard primarily, and and typing very doing things very explicitly through through the keyboard. Like let's take for example just writing an email, right? Then we've written the email, and that's what we do. We write it out. And this can be applied to all aspects of work. But if you start applying to AI to that, what you're writing, if you want AI help, might actually change a little bit, right? Maybe you're starting to write prompts now, right? Now you're not really writing the email. You're trying to describe to this artificial intelligence what
oh,
you want to convey and how you want to convey it, and in how many words and in what tone, and that's what you're writing. And then your email comes out. Well, that kind of shift is going to start happening in all these platforms. There's speaking about Airtable, which is one of my favorite low code platforms, and I do a lot of work with customers, and I built my entire business on that. It's just very, very capable. They've really embraced AI, both in terms of how you engage with the tool, but how you can use AI against your data, which is really cool because some people like we have a bunch of data, but what do we do with AI in this data? How do you do that? They're trying to answer that. But here's an amazing thing. It used to be when you wanted to go into Airtable and start a new database, or they call it a base, and then they would have templates, and they had hundreds of them, right? Choose your templates, that were named, project management this, or, whatever, tracking recipes. And so you kind of browse through their templates and choose a template, and then it would just print it up. Not today. What do you do today? You write a prompt. You go in and say, what are you trying to do? What is the data that you're trying to track? What's the relationships? What kind of entities are in there? What kind of reporting do you want? And you just tell a story to it. You write, and then it creates the base for you based off of that. So now you're prompting a solution, not just speaking. So how we interact with all the technology we do is going to evolve quite a bit in that way.
Wow, that's really interesting. I had not even thought about that because I feel like AI is always prompting me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you want to say this? Like, one time I was trying to type Oompa Loompa in a text, and everybody's probably like, "What the hell kind of text do you say?" So send out to people, Cecilia, but it just wouldn't let me do it. It was like getting
Right.
in my way because it kept prompting, "Don't you mean this?"
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't thought about it. You're prompting the AI to actually do the work for you, and I know a lot of people have mentioned to me, especially the last like 3 or 4 years, that they like to train AI to write in the tone and voice of a leader on their board, for example. And they just say, write it this way, and the AI does it for you. And it's interesting what you said about the keyboard, because I still use the keyboard, but I would say probably about 40% of the time I'm giving verbal commands
Mm-hmm.
to the computer or dictating to the computer. So it's more like, people who know me know I like Star Trek. I like all the stories except Enterprise. What a waste of a show. Anyway, but that's my editorial comment.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they talk to the computer and the computer talk, we're really at that point now already in a basic way. There's like that funny scene in Star Trek: The Voyage Home where Mr. Scott's just talking to the computer. It won't do anything, so he starts talking to the mouse at the microphone.
Right.
And he's like, "Oh, a keyboard, how quaint!" And I think we're really kind of getting there. How quaint. Yeah. I have to actually use my fingers and type the words myself, but I really think that's going to have a lot of different positive outcomes, not just for automation, but for accessibility, for example. So like, let's say maybe you have carpal tunnel and you can't type, so you can dictate. So that would be nice too. But so what are, so we've talked about why you need to have an overarching management system for your technology so that you can automate effectively, not just efficiently, because we want to have good outcomes. And we talked about the different kind of systems we can put into place. But so, Brian, what are some of the positive outcomes that people get from really having a well thought out automation system?
Yeah, I love that question. And that question actually has another side to that coin, right? Which is, what's the problem? How does the problem space that you're trying to solve, right, present itself to get these positive outcomes? What's the problems, and then what's the positive outcomes? And so I'll start with the problem space, and then I think it supports, and everyone might relate to what the outcomes are then. And the problem space is spreadsheet chaos, right? And other people call it other names, but we'll call it spreadsheet chaos. It's in every organization, right? And I mean, spreadsheets are great. They're really an amazing tool that have pushed us forward for the last 25 years. But can anyone even get their head around how many spreadsheets are in your organization being used individually? Then there's collaboration on spreadsheets. Then you have so many different tabs, and then you have this copying, spreadsheets and sending out, and then they're changing this, and then you're trying to sync up. They're great, but the problems that come with that are, where's the latest version? Is this really the data is this the accurate data that we have? How do we know? And then we're trying to roll up information intelligence so the organization can make some decisions on what we should be doing. And that is very difficult. People spend hours and hours and hours on weekly basis trying to extract intelligence from these things into some more centralized location. That's spreadsheet chaos, right?
Right.
That is the problem that low code tools and automation address. They're like, all right, well, that was a smart way to work. There's some nice aspects to working in a spreadsheet type environment, but it doesn't really manage a lot of these other things really well. And so, tools like Airtable or Smart Suite is another one. That's what they are made for, is to address that. And so how does it present itself as a win? So then you start to have some of the same aspects of, like, we have an easy interface to put in our data and view our data in this row column format if we want it that way. But we can easily switch it to some other formats. Let's see that same data in a Kanban board or a timeline or a gallery of cards, or however we want to see the data. Let's just see it like that immediately. Let's collaborate on it together in real time and know who's doing what without that becoming cumbersome. Let's integrate other data from other systems into it easily. Let's report out of it. Let's roll up the information into intelligence and report out on dashboards that executives can see, or maybe even external people can view for free, view some statuses of things. All of those type of activities become really easy. They're the bread and butter of these types of platforms, while still trying to maintain the simplicity, in a way, of some of the spreadsheet aspects. They're really magical in that way, I think.
Wow, that's really well, yeah. And the whole spreadsheet thing, yes, I think we all have seen spreadsheet chaos, even in volunteer groups, volunteer committees. Everybody's got their own spreadsheet, and who's marking what where, we don't know. But no, that's really interesting thing. So you also had mentioned, now you've already talked about shadow IT, and you've mentioned how do you balance that? So is it good to let people use their, and I know you've already addressed this pretty well, but is it good to let people have their own shadow IT? Like, is it helpful to let an individual use something that's comfortable for them, or is that just getting in the way again?
So I think at the personnel level, we've got a lot of younger people entering our workforce, right? And one of the most aggravating things that anyone can experience at any organization is to have ideas, maybe be aware of a system that brings a lot of value in a lot of ways, and not be able to leverage it or use it because someone doesn't want to take the time to look at it, or it's just we don't do that. We do it this way, and we don't do that. That can be really, really frustrating. And when you get into these generational differences in comfort with of technology in general, maybe even comfort with AI, those contrasts are going to get wider. So we have to enable that kind of energy, right? But it can't run away where everyone's doing everything on their own, and so that we don't have a unified view of where we're going. So that's part of the governance structure, and that needs to occur in all organizations. I think in an ideal organization, you want people to feel like, I've got an idea and I really like this tool. I can talk to somebody about it. I can say, hey, I found this and I think it's really cool. And someone will say, tell me about it. And maybe someone might even say, well, let's do a proof of concept where you prove its value in some way. Or, you say you're going to address this problem. Go spend a few hours this week and tell it and show us how would it address that problem. And we have a tool that's kind of similar. So at the same time, tell us why it's better or different than that tool, right? But you can put the onus back on to prove, its business value in that context. But there's a format, a forum, and a framework for management as a whole to listen to evaluate and then make decisions. And maybe the decision this year to that person is, I don't think we're quite ready for that. We're doing this. Let's go for 12 months. Do it this way. But then let's reevaluate, and I want you to come back and say, look, this, different, so that you can kind of keep the conversations and the energy going. So I think that's a big part of the balancing.
Well, and that's a really positive outcome too, because you're making newer staff members or younger staff members feel like they are part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important, and a perfect time to have these conversations is budget time, when you're looking at the budgets and you're looking ahead and you're saying, okay, well, we have technology dollars we need to invest because we need to have this now in our world, because we're not going back to carbon paper anytime soon. unless that big EMP happens, electromagnetic pulse happens and wipes all
Right.
our data out, then we'll be back on that. But I think that's a really good way to do it. It's a really positive approach. Is like, let's have that infrastructure. In the ideal situation, you would be able to go bring it up in some way, some sort of brainstorming or incubator, or whatever you want to call it, at your organization.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be great. And we all know, Brian, that automation saves us time, it saves us energy. Sometimes it saves us money. I say sometimes it saves money because you do have to make an investment in it
Mm-hmm.
in some
Mm-hmm.
cases. But what are some of the other positive outcomes from thinking through a streamlined automation process at an organization?
So if it's done well and in the right areas, I mean, it can definitely drive employee satisfaction, right? So if you have someone who's, 3 hours every single week, they're having to do this task, and it's grabbing and copying and pivoting and rolling up and then copying and, and just those kind of things to be a type of organization that says, let's find those things. Let's automate them so it takes you 10 minutes instead of the 3 hours. I've some of the most ecstatic reactions I've ever seen from any individuals are from those, seeing that done. And they're like, I don't have to do that anymore. That's so awesome. Right. So, and they can spend that 3 hours now doing something that has much higher value for the organization, right? Which is
Mhm.
really more, more strategic or more, we're just focused in an area that just has more value. So I'd say that is one of them. The other is that it keeps the organization moving forward so that you don't get too much debt in your process. There's a thing
Mhm.
called technical debt. Technical debt is where you let your tools age out, and to a
Okay.
point where, let's say you even had server, let's take an example of it, something that everyone might not understand is like your laptops. At some point, they get so old, they start being problematic. They start breaking more often, and it slows. They get really slow. Now everyone's suffering. Their productivity is low. They're not happy. They're frustrated. That's technical debt right now, and you solve that by buying a new one, right? And so now you've gotten rid of that technical debt. Well, the same thing happens in our processes, right? There is process debt, right? Where we've done things one way and it's maybe been with spreadsheets and everything. And as it ages and there are new solutions that come up, that actually starts to be more of a drag and a weight and an anchor to an organization. And updating those processes really empower the organization for the next year or two. And you just keep doing that over and over.
Wow. Yeah, you have such a great turn of phrase on technology. I love it because like I never have thought of it that way. Technical debt.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had to age out a lot of computers. I actually have two big ones down in the basement right now. My husband keeps saying, "When are you going to get rid of these?"
Mm-hmm.
Because they're all in ones, so they're really big and they're
Mm-hmm.
kind of heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also if you have an older like Surface Book, like I have a first generation Surface Book that I've since replaced just 4 years ago with
Mm-hmm.
a Surface, whatever the current Surface Book is, whatever one I bought.
Mm-hmm.
And the newer one's starting to run out of memory already
Mm-hmm.
because I do a lot of video and things like that. So I'm in technical debt all the time. I have 3 external hard drives to keep moving stuff off that hard drive
Right.
so that I have enough RAM, because
Yeah.
I learned, if you don't have enough hard drive space, you're going to run out of RAM because that's where it pulls some of it. And it's like, oh my
That's right.
God, and it's like, why is my CPU always running at 100%? That's when I usually buy a new computer because it's like I can't figure out why it keeps doing it. But that's really an interesting way of doing it. But I really like the process debt
Mm-hmm.
perspective because how many times do we say in associations or other kinds of nonprofits, but that's the way we've always done it, even though it doesn't work anymore and it's slow and clunky and nobody likes the way it works, but that's just the way we do it. I just love that. And that's where technology, I think, can be a driver for change in your process management. Because if you are thinking
Yeah.
it through that way, you're going to update those processes.
That's so important. The biggest struggle to technology upgrades I've seen is resistance to process change, right? And if you think about it, the processes, all these processes that we say that's the way we've always done, those processes were created based on some form of technology and process that we had. Maybe it was just spreadsheets and and things, but it was something that we were using, and we do this and then we pass it off, and so we created something about that. So technology moves on, capabilities move on, and so when you're going to replace and come up with a new set, you have to come with a mindset. It's like, all right, we're going to have to modernize our processes too. We're going to have to do things differently, and then sometimes it's so it fits the tool set a little bit better. Not all the time, some things are really important, but if you do that, you realize that business can actually move smoother and quicker and faster. And then 6 months later, you talk to the person like, oh, I can't even believe we were doing it that way. I just can't even believe we did it that way that long but it's the willingness to get there. But it is big. It's a big part. You can't have technology advancement, and updating without process advancement and updating at the same time. They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can't keep doing 12 steps in something when you only need 6 now. So
Mm-hmm.
exactly. But people say, well, we do it this way. Wow, that's
Mm-hmm.
such a good point. But this has been a great conversation. And I know you and I could go on and on and on about it. But unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. So, as you know, I like to ask my guests, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take home today? And how can they get in touch with you if they would like to talk with you more?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I have really enjoyed this. I always do. I guess the one thought is if whenever you think in your own organization, like, isn't there a better way to do this? Make the spreadsheet chaos. Am I involved in spreadsheet chaos right now? And isn't there a better way to do that? That's a great question to ask. And I would be the person you might want to ask that question to, and I can maybe help you. And sometimes the answer might be, maybe you're better left with doing what you're doing and just tweak it a little bit. But I bet there are some of these new great tools that can really make a difference in your organization. And they can reach out to me through my email address, which is my name, Brian with an I, Brian Scott at cleartoneconsulting.com, cleartoneconsulting.com. And I'd love to have an opportunity to talk about your unique challenges and see what might be out there that can help you.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and just based on our 2 podcast episode conversations, I would say give Brian a call because he knows what he's talking about, and you can
Thank
have
you.
fun talking with him. So
Thank you so much, Cecilia. I really enjoy this. I love doing podcasts, and you ask such great questions, and it's always such a good conversation. We could go on for hours for sure.
yeah, we could. Yes. Well, thank you for that, and I hope you'll come back next year.
Oh, I will.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe we'll do something on 2025 New Year resolutions or something for technology. That would be fun. That would be
Sounds
a
great.
fun one. Okay, great. Well, we need to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So again, gentle reminder, if you haven't followed us or subscribed yet, please do. We're on all your favorite podcast services. So we'd love to have you join us every week. If you would like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization see things differently and bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. If you have the CAE and are looking for an ethics credit, we are offering our ethics course every month. So check out our education page and find out what else is on my mind besides texting about Oompa Loompas and Bentleys on my blog page, Going Rogue. You can also find that at the website. So on behalf of Brian and myself, we'll see you next time.